You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. And now, here's two guys who are working off their gambling debts by doing yard work for station manager Patrick Watt, Evan, and Joe.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane here in St. Andrews. We're still deciding what season it is.
And you're watching episode 82 of Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. By the time this episode airs, March Madness and the Masters will have both ended, and baseball will be about 25 games into their season. And Ev, it's also a bit late, but you wanted to give a quick shout out to a team.
Yeah, I mean, it's that time of year around here, too, with university sports wrapping up. Quick shout out to friend of the show, our buddy Josh Fleck, who's UMB St. John Seawolves men's basketball team. Had a wicked year this year. They're a crazy story. I mean, they didn't win a game 2 years ago. They were right around 500 last year. And then this year, they had their first trip ever to the Atlantic Finals, which they won by taking down the fourth, the second, and the first seeds in the event, which is pretty wild. And from that, they had the team's first trip ever to nationals. And they actually won a game there, too, which was the first ever. So super cool. I followed it along with him, and he was kind of walking me through and telling me the experience of the players and the parents and how awesome it is for that program. But yeah, good for them.
Nice. Seawolves, correct?
Correct.
How about that? I'll give a quick shout out for down here to Sheehan High School girls basketball of Wallingford and my friend Mike Busillo, who is also named Coach of the Year. And he and his team won the Class M state championship for the first time since 1976. So shout out to Mike, his daughter Gabby, who started for the team, and the Sheehan High girls team.
Wow, awesome.
All right, right on to the music spotlight. I dug out a group called the Silver Wolf Band. They are an indigenous folk pop rock band from Happy Valley, Goose Bay in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Wow, dig deep, my friend.
Check out their song Little Ways and check out their band online at silverwolfband.com.
Okay.
Well, after the break, we'll tell you about an amazing story from a relatively unknown hockey league that started in 1895. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Our first guest is a Canadian-born sports historian, documentary filmmaker, and author who has written over a dozen books, which, to be honest, is more than the combined total that Evan and I have read in our entire adult lives. But I digress. Well, in 2004, he and his brother wrote the book Black Ice, The Lost History of the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, which covered this relatively unknown league that existed from 1895 to 1925. So to tell us more about this unique part of regional sports history, let's welcome in George Fosty. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, George. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Evan.
Well, I was fascinated when I heard about the Colored Hockey League that started in 1895. George, how did you first find out about the league, and then eventually what made you decide to write a book about it?
We were researching the global history of ice hockey. We were working on another book that became splendid as the Sun, a 5,000-year history of hockey. And myself and two other historians back then, my brother Daryl and a historian by the name of John Jelly, an English-Canadian historian. We were researching the global history of hockey, and we came across three article references to the Colored Hockey League, in 1923 reference and a footnote of blacks playing hockey on teams in the Maritimes. That's all it said. And then we found a 1991 reference in a book by Sandy Jones that was Beyond Heroes, was the history of Nova Scotia sports. And he had a small one-page reference to blacks playing hockey. And he said black Canadians also played hockey. And the line that caught our attention was, he said they also had their own league. And at that point, we came across newspaper articles out of the Acadian Recorder up in Halifax documenting this league. And over a 7-year period, we found 65 newspaper articles validating this league. And that was the basis of our book.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, like the NHL, you hear the original 6. So if we look at this league, how many teams were in the league when it started, and whereabouts do we know that they were located?
The first initial teams, it looks like there was 3 teams that started in 1895. They were all church-based teams, comprised of players from the Dartmouth Church and then 2 churches in Halifax, the city of Halifax. We, in recent last couple of years, we've found additional newspaper articles making reference to the Halifax Clippers. And we're not sure if that's the Stanley Clippers, or that one team was called the Stanleys. We're not sure if that's a reference to that team. It was a nickname, or if that's another team. So there's at least 3 teams that started in 1895, but there's 4th team that we're trying to investigate and determine if this is in fact a 4th team that is unknown to history. And so that's where we are on that research. That period from 1895 through 1898, it looks like there's 3 or 4 teams there. And then by 1898, there's another team that arrives called the Africville Seasides, and it's comprised of players out of Africville, a small enclave just to the west of Halifax. And that team is in existence for the next 25, 30 years.
Now, who owned the teams and who coached them?
The teams originally were church league teams, so no one owned them. There was a couple by 1900. By 1900, you've got some athletic clubs that come into play, and they're comprised out of one team is called the West End Rangers out of Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. They were a club. They were controlled by the Mills family. Their players were primarily the Mills brothers out of that area, and those guys were some of the best athletes in Canada at that time. The incredible speed skaters. They were actually, a couple of them were actually competitive speed skaters. So the guys out of PEI were a club in what we would call a modern sports club. There was another team called the Eurekas out of Halifax. They had started out as a church league team, but they became more of a club as they went along. So those are the early groups. But the Colored Hockey League by the mid-1920s, around 1924 to 27, they become much more organized, much more structured, much more modern in their design. They had a developmental league, they had their main league, and then they had a feeder team where their elite players went on to Boston and played for the Boston Panthers in an all-white league, which was interesting. And these guys were so competitive, they actually tried to gain entry into the National Hockey League in the late 1920s.
Cool. And you mentioned about all of the newspaper articles and stuff that you're finding. So there's clearly some traction there, but do you have any indication of what type of support the league got from like fan base?
We see that the average, in early 1900s, the average Canadian Hockey League or hockey game attracted about 400 spectators. We see that as a normal a level of attendance in these games, but we also see them surge whenever they had a championship game, up to as many as 1,200 people showing up. And you got to remember, they were paying 25 cents entry fee to get into these games, so that was quite steep, for attendance. That back in the day, 25 cents was was quite a lot of money, given that, you could buy a 10-pound bag of flour for 20 cents back in the day. So, that it wasn't cheap, but they would attract 1,200 people in a town like Halifax, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
That's great. That's like a Leafs game now.
Well, yeah, I guess, in some ways it was a financial boom for these, for these black teams, because they split the money in amongst themselves. And you got to remember, some of these families were quite poor. Right. So their players playing on these teams, it was an income. And,
absolutely.
So it was pretty amazing, actually, when you look at it in a sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to wrap things up a little quicker here. So I'm going to hit you with 2 last things. Give us quick answers. Tell us briefly about the 2 important parts of the sport that the Colored Hockey League was credited with inventing.
Yeah, they're credited with inventing the slap shot. they brought it in from the ponds. The first reference to a slap shot is in 1892 on the Dartmouth Lakes. And but they were the first league to allow the slap shot to come indoors. And you got to remember, these guys that played for these early black hockey teams were also doubled up as baseball players. So it's natural that they would incorporate their baseball swing into their style of play. Right. So that was the first one. The second one is the flopping goalies. That was something that they brought in from the Dartmouth Lakes and the ice on the ponds, because you know, if you're sitting out in the middle of a lake and you lose the puck, it goes halfway down the lake. So these flopping goalies were quite common back in the day on the Dartmouth Lakes or on the pond hockey, but they brought that into the arenas. Prior to that, it was illegal for goalies to go down on the ice. So those are the two modern innovations they brought into the game.
All right, and lastly, before we wrap it up for good, tell us 30 seconds about the 2022 documentary that was based on your book.
Yeah, we were working with LeBron James and Drake and others produced a documentary called Black Ice. It won the Best Short Film or Best People's Choice Award at the Toronto International Film Festival. And it documented in part our story and our search for the Colored Hockey League, as well as the history of the Colored Hockey League. But then it brought it up to the modern era, where they talked about the NHL and the problems facing black athletes, as well as female athletes in hockey today that are of color. And it was quite informative because I think a lot of people assume, even to this day, that hockey is pretty well remains a white-dominated sport, even though we see more and more diversity in the game. So I think it's, in that sense, it was quite a revealing documentary, and it got a lot of play in the United States and Canada. So we're pretty proud of that. Just the fact that LeBron James and Drake would back something like that is also quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, he is George Fosty, co-author with his brother Daryl of the book Black Ice, The Lost History of the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes. You can find their book on Amazon, and if it's not already at your local bookstore, which we recommend, by all means order it, as it is a great read. And Amazon does well enough already, so shop local there. And the documentary Black Ice is currently streaming on Hulu, Disney Plus, Apple TV. You can search for it and find it. George, thanks so much for coming on the show and just telling us about this fascinating piece of sports history.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Well, after the break, it's time for another edition of Small Town Spotlight. We'll head to Ontario and visit a movie theater like no other in the world. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report. For this edition of Small Town Spotlight, we head to Stratford, Ontario, 90 minutes southwest of Toronto, a city of just over 30,000, which is home to the famous Stratford Festival, recognized worldwide for over 70 years for its production of Shakespearean plays. It's also where former NHL players Eddie Olczyk and Chris Pronger cut their teeth playing junior hockey, and is also the place where a young and upcoming singer named Justin Bieber, you guys can Google it, Bieber. That's where Justin grew up. And when you get to 62 Wellington Street, you may just miss what you're looking for. It's the world's smallest movie theater, the Little Prince Micro Cinema, which seats just 12 people. So to find out more about this unique theater, let's welcome in owner and operator Leigh Cooney. Leigh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You told me you were born in Dublin, Ireland, then at age 6, you made the big jump over the pond to Nova Scotia, then on to Kitchener, and the last 15 years, Stratford. When did the Little Prince Micro Cinema open, and what made you decide to even open up a movie theater in the first place?
Yeah, it wasn't very well planned from the beginning, honestly. I did run a little gift shop in the same space as the cinema is now for a number of years. And then, I had this little space at the back. Basically, it was a large storage room that we were using as a gallery for a few years. And then we also did film film competitions for local short filmmakers around town, City Hall, wherever we could find a screen and a projector. And then, yeah, at some point I just thought, it'd be fun if we could do this all year round, So then I thought some fold up chairs, pull down screen, that sort of thing. We could just put it in the storage room at the back. And, but I guess just the artist in me, thought, hey, you need some curtains and, a little bit of damask wallpaper. And, now you can't see in front of you. You have to have the tiered seating. And, one thing, it just kind of kept rolling and rolling and rolling until it started looking more and more like a small movie theater. And that's when we started researching to see what else was out there. And, we came across Guinness and we came across all these inspirations. They were all bigger than us, basically. So we realized maybe we have something going here. So, yeah, so we didn't plan it from the beginning. It just kind of fell in my lap.
Now, I see you're right in the building now. How old's the building and what was in there before the theater?
Yeah, so the building, I think, is about 100 years old or so. And I think it was originally a hotel. I know that. And now the ground floor, which would have been the original lobby and restaurant area, has been split up. So we're just 1/3 of that ground floor area. And it actually was like a Salvation Army for a number of years. And then before they decided to move into something larger. And then it was a computer shop when we moved in, actually. So it was very, very different than what we're working with now. We had to strip it all down, start from scratch. It's got a lot of history.
We see you're in one of the 12 seats in the theater. When did the Guinness Book of Records officially name you the world's smallest movie theater?
Yeah, so it was actually officially, it was in, I think, the end of 2020 that we got it. And then we didn't release that because of COVID. We realized that if we did it, we'd be getting everybody excited about a tiny movie theater that they couldn't actually attend. So no one can actually come in and sit down. So we held on to it for a little while until COVID ended. I think it was 2020, 2021, something like that. And yes, we held on to it for a little while. And then I think we released it in 2021. The end of 2021, I think, was when we finally.
All right. Now, if someone in, say, Connecticut opened a theater with 11 seats, would you rip out 2 of yours and get down to 10 to keep the record? Or?
Of course I would, yeah. Maybe the incredible shrinking cinema. I'm just going to keep taking seats out. I mean, honestly, I do think about that. It stops being like reasonable for me to be able to run a business the smaller it gets. I mean, honestly, I'd probably be supportive of it because I figure it's only a matter of time before someone says, hey, I can do that, right? But it's a lot harder than it looks. But also, again, the smaller it is, the more less realistic it is as a business trying to operate. So yes, I mean, we're opening a second location, which actually might end up being technically smaller than that one, simply due to some permitting issues and size. So technically, it might actually be smaller than the one we hold the record for. So we were hoping it would be the world's second smallest movie theater, which we thought would be very funny as a marketing tool. But so now we don't know what to do with it. Now we're just going to hope people just don't notice that it's technically smaller than the one we have the Guinness record for. So yeah, someone's welcome to try, but it is a lot of work for a very small return. So
now, how often are movies shown that are open to the public as opposed to your private screenings?
Yeah, generally there's at least one every day. Sometimes on the weekends there's none, simply because that's when people want the space for themselves. That's when we end up booking solid all day with private bookings. But we put in ticketed screenings like a regular movie theater in between the private bookings. So there's usually one, sometimes 2 or 3 in a day. And then if it's a slower time, it might be ticketed all weekend or all day long. But it's usually 7 to 8, maybe 10 even on a given week.
All right, now, what type of private events do you hold in the theater?
Yeah, well, obviously anything you can do with 12 people. We do a lot of birthdays, a lot of kids. And, people love it for their kids because, hey, kids they squirm and they want to talk during the movie. They want to get up and move around. And, taking 12 kids out to a movie theater is obviously challenging. I know that as a parent. So a lot of people bring them to us because then the kids can move around, they can talk, they can sing. But I mean, beyond that, honestly, we do everything from retirement parties to even small weddings, staff parties, bachelorette parties, a lot of that kind of thing. A lot of dirty dancing and like Mamma Mia. It's a lot of singing, a lot of and then occasionally, we do the odd like sports programming where someone will come in and they just want to watch the game. But with a bunch of people, it's a lot more space, more licensed. They can get drinks, they can bring food in. And have someone serve them the whole time. It's basically like a private bar then in that way. You're going out to a bar, but it's just you and your friends. So
now, have you ever had to turn down a request to show a specific movie for a private party?
No, not yet. Honestly, Thankfully, I have never had to run into any issues yet. Outside of maybe we don't have licensing for it or whatever. That that's sort of boring. But really, I don't know. Like I'm part of the network of independent cinemas across Canada, and so I pay attention to what they say. They're all bigger than us. But that conversation came up recently with someone saying, what do you do in certain scenarios where the movie is maybe controversial or whatever, it's like, how do you turn them away if they want to host a private screening? And I paid attention to that because we're so small. Private screenings is what we do, right? So it's like, where do I say, well, it's your space, you do whatever you want with it, but I also then have to deal with the blowback later when they're like, look what we went to see at the world's smallest movie theater, and I'm going, oh my god, no, don't promote us that way. But no, we haven't had any issues yet.
That's good. What's the most unique event you've held in the theater?
Yeah, I think probably 2 years now, not in a row because of COVID and all that. We did actually bring a pianist in from Toronto, and we did a couple of silent films, some Charlie Chaplin's,
Cool.
and Buster Keaton, Nosferatu, that sort of thing, depending on what the occasion was. And yeah, this guy, that's what he does. He does other things as well, but he does specialize in doing improv, live piano accompaniment to silent films. So he wheeled his piano right into the theater, which was already pretty small as it is. But we made it work. He took one corner and he watches and he bangs it out as it goes, and he's like, he really improvs. He does a little talk beforehand, about the history of silent film and, the role of the piano player in that. And I think that's probably the most fascinating thing I've seen done in there, honestly.
Nice. Now, you told me you're very close to opening a second location in Cambridge, Ontario, about 50 minutes east of your current location. Same amount of seats, and will it have the same name?
Yeah, so it'll be the same name. It'll basically be, it's in an area called the Gaslight District, so it'll probably be the Gaslight, Little Prince Gaslight Edition. But yeah, so it was intended to be 13 seats actually, so it was going to be one seat larger than our 12 seats in Stratford. And as it turns out, it might end up being 11 seats just due to some permitting issues and just the width of aisles and things that have changed since we built Little Prince. So now what was going to be the world's second smallest movie theater is now going to be technically the smallest, but I'm not going to compete with myself for the record. So we're just going to keep it in Stratford and just promote this as a slightly smaller, but not the smallest movie theater in the world.
Yeah, you don't want to piss off the ghosts of the Stratford Theater there.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, before we let you out of here, we often ask our guests on Small Town Spotlight to give us their favorite non-chain restaurant in the area. And you told me you had two. So go ahead and give a quick shout out to your two favorite places in Stratford, Ontario.
Yeah, I'd say originally, for years now, I've been saying Patso, which has two floors. The basement is a pizzeria, like a high-end pizzeria. And I've been going, it's one of the places I came to before I lived in Stratford. I used to drive to Stratford just to go there. I love Patso. I think it's just a Stratford institution. And then recently, a little bar and bistro called the Starlight actually opened up next door to us, and they are phenomenal as well. They're just such good service, and the food's amazing, the drinks are amazing, and just such nice ambiance. And I'm not just saying that because they are next door to us. I mean, they are amazing. We're just lucky to have them there. But absolutely, if you're in Stratford, one of those two places, you can't go wrong.
That's great. Well, he is Leigh Cooney of Stratford, Ontario, by way of Ireland, Nova Scotia, and all points east. And he's the owner-operator of the Little Prince Micro Cinema, the world's smallest movie theater with just 12 seats, possibly 11, located right in Stratford, and soon also be in Cambridge, Ontario. You can find out more about his place at thelittleprincecinema.com, and of course on Instagram at The Little Prince Cinema. Leigh, keep up the great work, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
We're back. Good interview there with Leigh. But I'm not sure about the PEI sweatshirt you got on, man. Have you ever heard of Soap and Water? That thing's pretty grungy.
Yeah, probably 2023 maybe was the last time I watched that PEI.
It appears that way.
Yeah, which I'll also give a shout out to our camp, which is going to be a second week in PEI, Kensington PEI in August, and our St. Andrews camp is already sold out 4 months in advance. Good God. All right. Well, we are out of time, so that's it for episode 82 of Mc&T Sports Report. I'm Joe in New Haven.
I've been here in St. Andrews.
Thanks to Patrick Watt and Florence Mitchell for producing and editing a show that's more popular than an elbows up t-shirt. Hashtag not my president.
Oh.
Oops. Thanks for watching. This is Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews.